The KC Cup is back, Eaglets. And maybe you need some advice, some guidance, some general direction on how to slap these phantom side pieces to the afterlife where they belong, damn it. I actually like Phantom Knights. Anyway, we'll start with some cards I think can be of use to you that you may not have thought about. I'm gonna start with a card that I gave heavy praise for the last time I made a video like this, and that is Stygian Dirge. Dirge is a continuous trap card that appears for sleep paralysis victims and reduces the level of all monsters your opponent controls by 1. It's a great example of a situationally strong card, as most quote-unquote side deck cards are, but stacking it against a card like Poisonous Winds that only really counters Harpies is that Stygian Dirge shuts down more decks than not. Phantom Knights will have their levels reduced to 2, which completely locks them out of their extra decks, so they have to prioritize getting rid of Dirge first. And it's something that they cannot do with Breaksword since they just can't summon him. Harpies have no extra deck against Dirge, neither does Teller Knights, and Magnets can make use of Delta going down to level 3 if they control more than one copy of him, which isn't unusual, but you're still heavily crippling the deck out of its extra deck. Gandora, Buster Blader, and Gaia don't really mind this card, and that's kind of the issue, but run it one copy, you can find it winning you games. So it's just a nice anti-meta card to keep in mind. It is a rare in Valiant Souls, so you'd really only want one anyway. It's not too bad to get your hands on. Next up, let's go over a card that functions on the opposite end of the meta, and that is Non-Fusion Area. Another continuous trap that reads, neither player can fusion summon. Yeah, real fucking confusing, I know. But against the meta of Buster Blader, Gaia, Metal Foes is on the rise right now, especially with the new spell card, and Melodious is still floating around, and all that makes Non-Fusion Area a decent tech that covers bases in the meta that Dirge does not. Except for Gandora, but we'll get to that. Dirge is a way better card, but I do think Non-Fusion Area is another easy to get tech that you should keep in mind. So Gandora is dumb, like the dumbest gimmicky piece of trash deck I've seen in a long time. Very reliant on banishing card, not even very, it's just banishing cards. So you do have some counters against that, and that also does apply to Phantom Knights since they banish cards for their combos too. I'm really just going to talk about 3 cards. One of them is completely free to play and the other 2 are harder to get your hands on, but I want to bring them up just in case you potentially have some copies of them. So the best free to play card to counter this meta by far is Chaos Hunter. Chaos Hunter is an ultra rare obtainable from the card trader. It has the effect that when your opponent special summons a monster, you can discard a card to special summon Chaos Hunter. And then it has this little passive effect on the field where your opponent cannot banish cards. So yes, Chaos Hunter single-handedly shuts down Gandora and shuts down Phantom Knights. And Chaos Hunter is fairly easy to summon as well. The biggest problem with Chaos Hunter is the discard cost. That's pretty hefty for most decks. However, to just win against Gandora or even Phantom Knights in the right situation by itself, it's definitely worth it. So Chaos Hunter is a card I recommend for this meta. Tech it in at one copy, it could definitely be worth it. And so for the not free-to-play cards, Artifact Lancia is one of the unsung absolute counters to this meta. Artifact Lancia has the same effects as most of the artifact cards, where it can set itself as a spell card, and if it's destroyed during your opponent's turn, it'll special summon itself. But it also has a hand trap effect that is also a quick effect, so think about Thunder Dragon Dark, where you can just use the effect whenever you want, where neither player can banish cards until the end phase. And of course, Gandora is an OTK deck, so being able to shut them down for that one turn can basically win you the game. So Artifact Lancia is another example like Chaos Hunter that it can just straight up do it against Gandora and Phantom Knights if you have the card. Lancia is a main box ultra rare, but it does come from a pretty good box, one that I would believe people have gone through, so you might potentially have a copy of Artifact Lancia. It's just an assumption on my part, but just in case you do happen to have this card and you just never really thought about it, just kind of sits in the card catalog, it is a very good counter to the meta. And I can say basically the same thing about DD Crow, except it doesn't really counter Phantom Knights, and DD Crow does banish a monster from the graveyard, which seems counterintuitive. However, if you can banish Gandora X from the graveyard, card, then Gandora just isn't going to be able to do their combos since they can't banish that card as a material. DD Crow is another main box ultra rare just if you have it. So outside of those interesting techs that can counter what's going on, what are you going to see the most? Obviously, with Phantom Knights being tier 1, you're going to expect to see them, but I don't think Phantom Knights play percentage has been sung quite that much. Phantom Knights are like everywhere. They pushed tier 0 status at a certain point. Phantom Knights are insane. You will see them a whole bunch, probably more in stage 2 than in stage 1. In stage 1, there's a lot more deck diversity. You'll see a lot more rogue decks and even outside the rogue category. So stage 1, this more applies for stage 2. However, you will still probably see a bunch of Phantom Knights in stage 1. And then I think you'll see Gandora a whole bunch because it is a new deck. It is a fresh deck. People want to play the new and fresh things, and it's also absurdly strong and gimmicky and consistent because of another broken skill that Konami decided to make for some reason. I think you will see Teller Knights a lot because it is a very strong, consistent, and affordable deck. The same thing goes for Gaia, and I think we're gonna see Metal Foes quite a bit actually as well. So Metal Foes hasn't really popped up all that much, but I would just kind of be on the lookout for that deck. I would learn how to counter it because I do think it's gonna pop up more than you think. And then another deck that I'm expecting to see a whole bunch that I don't think a lot of people are talking about or a lot of people are assuming is gonna do really well in the KC Cup, but I do, and that's Gravekeepers. With Gravekeepers Commandit coming to the game, Gravekeeper decks just have a straight search of Necro Valley, which is probably the best anti-meta card in this meta. Necro Valley prevents cards from leaving the graveyard, just period. They can't go anywhere else. So that means cards cannot be summoned from the graveyard to the field, so no Monster Reborn. They cannot be added back to the hand from the graveyard, and they can't be banished. And Gravekeepers have a built-in engine to consistently get Necro Valley on the field, and they're the only deck that can really accommodate that. Gravekeepers are very slow. It's a very methodical, take your time, cripple your opponent kind of deck that just so happens to be very good against the meta. So I would be on the outlook for Gravekeepers as well in this KC Cup. So there's some interesting tech cards you might not have thought about, or some stuff you may have that you never use, and those are the decks I think you'll see the most. But what are some tips that apply to you personally as a player? And there's really two big tips that I always give for when it comes to things like this. Number one is stay calm and take your time. Sounds very general and a very rudimentary statement, but think about it this way. If you are analyzing everything from the start of the game, just taking your time, you're not playing too aggressive, you're not rushing into everything, you're not trying to win on every turn. And it's not to say that you can't do that. If you see a path to victory, obviously take it, but you have to find that path. Don't make your decisions as you go. Think about everything that you do. You got time. Even if you take a little bit and your opponent starts taunting you, fuck that guy. And then the last tip is just keep dueling. I mean, you're not gonna get better. You're not gonna get in a rhythm. You're not gonna get in a flow if you just quit. Keep dueling. You'll end up going against the same decks again and again and again, and you'll start to learn how your deck counters them and what your best options and avenues are with your deck against Phantom Knights or Gandora, Teller Knight, Gaia, whatever you're going against all the time. And lastly, my last tip for this KC Cup is don't play fucking Tretch. Like, if we just decided to like band together and like boycott it. I said I was gonna stop talking about it. No. I hate that card so much. Okay, I love you guys. Just have fun and good luck in the KC Cup.